I have encountered numerous accounts of infidelity, some of which are particularly distressing. It was disheartening to learn of these experiences. My narrative, while undoubtedly sorrowful, offers a unique perspective that merits consideration. I am uncertain as to why I am revisiting events that transpired so many years ago, but perhaps it is a means of demonstrating that positive outcomes can emerge over time, and that patience is a virtue. The experience appeared to facilitate the resolution of numerous issues. I subsequently entered into a committed relationship with my wife, which lasted for approximately a decade, including 7 years of marriage. We have 2 children who are now adults and have established their own lives. My wife and I initially met on a blind date, which proved to be an uncomfortable experience. My wife is an attractive woman with a vibrant personality. In contrast, I am a reserved individual, and I would not be considered an extrovert. I am not particularly striking in appearance, yet I do not claim to be a charismatic individual. I am typically reserved, and my wife was always the center of attention at social gatherings. She is kind-hearted and empathetic, consistently seeking the positive in others. Interestingly, she seemed to reciprocate my feelings, and our relationship gradually progressed. We were married and began to construct our lives together. Our lives were going very well indeed. We had a nice home, good finances, supportive families, good friends, and our children were fine. However, as is the case with many such stories, there was a catalyst that could change everything. Our catalyst was pregnancy. At that time, we had 2 small children, and we wanted to have a 3rd child to make our family even bigger. Furthermore, we were not experiencing any difficulties in our intimate relationship and were rapidly anticipating the arrival of our 3rd child. I was delighted and my wife informed me of the pregnancy. We waited approximately 3 months before disclosing the news to our extended family. Over the subsequent 3 months, we were preoccupied with various tasks, including preparing the nursery, readying our children for the new addition, and addressing financial matters. This period was arguably the most distressing in my life. Life took an unfortunate turn when my wife called me to say that there was something wrong with the baby. We promptly took her to the hospital, where we were met with the tragic news that my wife had lost the baby, which was 6 months along in its development. The experience left us both traumatized, and the drive home the next day was filled with silence and sadness. My wife went to bed that night and did not leave that room for the next 3 days, overwhelmed by the situation. My wife experienced profound sadness and depression. She felt that she had failed me as her husband and that she was to blame for the loss of our child. I attempted to reassure her that it was God's will and that she was not at fault. I encouraged her to try again when the time was right, but she remained despondent. 6 months passed, but she seemed to be emerging from her depression. And she began to return to her normal self. We both got along well with children, she regained her characteristic liveliness. We began to talk about the future. She also started exercising and getting back in shape. She really looked incredible, and I loved complimenting her and telling her how much I loved her. During this time, she also started talking to me about getting a part-time job. A part-time job was not primarily about the remuneration, rather, it was a means of leaving the house and remaining engaged in life. I encouraged her to consider her options and take action. To my surprise, she secured a position as a waitress and bartender in a restaurant on our street. Despite her possession of a business degree, she was reluctant to pursue a white-collar job due to concerns about the potential impact on our home and family. However, it would allow her to get up and move, and she could make some money for herself. The hours were convenient, and she felt like she was making a contribution. Additionally, she said that she needed to work and interact with adults, and she felt that this would help her get out of isolation at home. I told her this was great news and that she should go for it. I previously noted that my wife is an attractive woman, but I should also add that she is a curvy woman. Given her fitness level and weight loss, she was able to maintain her attractiveness to men while remaining faithful to me. She began working and performed well, working 2 or 3 evenings a week and usually on Friday or Saturday. I felt somewhat uncomfortable about her work clothes because they showed off her figure in a way that I found more revealing than I would have liked. It was tasteful, but I concede that I would have preferred a more conservative approach. She responded by suggesting that it was an effective method of attracting more tips and that her attire might also encourage romantic interest from me. The proprietor of the restaurant was a commendable individual who managed his business well. He treated his employees fairly and employed members of his family as well. His son, however, was somewhat arrogant and self-assured. He was born into affluence and was open about his lifestyle. He was approximately the same age as my wife. I must admit he was a very handsome man. He was married but had no children. His wife is a wonderful person who also worked in a restaurant and kept books. My son handled all the catering and special events. At least he should have been doing this from what I understand. He was quite lazy and constantly passed on his responsibilities to his family and colleagues. What he really liked to do was lift weights. He engaged in weight training, athletic activities, automobile transportation, and a lifestyle of financial dependence on his family. Additionally, he engaged in self-aggrandizing discourse and boasting about his prowess in romantic relationships. It is unclear how his wife managed to cope with these circumstances. While he possessed a charismatic personality, I did not perceive him to be particularly impressive. From our initial encounter, I sensed that he was merely a talkative individual. My wife informed me on multiple occasions that he was remarkably handsome, yet he exhibited a haughty demeanor. She described him as a scoundrel and indicated that she found him disagreeable. However, she felt compelled to maintain a professional relationship with him and to refrain from expressing her true opinions. Over time, a certain degree of friendship developed between them. I advised her that he was a source of considerable irritation and that she should exercise caution in her interactions with him. In the following months, my wife began to display unusual behavior. She began to monitor her phone and claimed to have to work late, subsequently spending long periods of time away from home. She also began to ignore me to some extent and seemed to be less attentive to the children than before. While my wife is a capable mother, at the time she appeared impatient with the entire family and was willing to assume additional responsibilities without my input. This was challenging because I also worked full-time. Given that I was the primary breadwinner for the family, I expressed my concerns to her. However, she informed me that everything was going well and that I was perceiving problems where none existed. On one occasion when we were alone and it was quite late, I attempted to initiate physical intimacy with her, but she rejected me outright. I inquired about the source of the problem, and she began to cry and tremble. I asked her again what was wrong, and then I was utterly astonished to learn that my wife had been in a relationship with the owner's son for approximately 6 months. The nature of their relationship had become sexual. She expressed her love for him and stated that she intended to leave me and move in with him. She also informed me that she had been deeply unhappy following the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start and the freedom to live her life. She also told me that she had been unhappy after the miscarriage and felt that something in our marriage had died. She needed a fresh start and the freedom to live her life. She informed me that she has developed strong feelings for this individual and that he is capable of providing her with happiness. I was taken aback by this revelation and urged her to reconsider her decision. However, she asserted that the opportunity had already passed and that she would be moving in with her new partner in the apartment they had already identified. I inquired about the children and she stated that it would be in their best interest to remain in the family home to maintain a stable environment, and that she would visit them regularly. To say that I was shocked by this turn of events would be an understatement. My wife informed me that she was perplexed by my apparent lack of understanding, as she believed I was aware of her discontent in our marriage and the miscarriage was the final straw. I was displeased to learn of her new relationship. It is one thing to be completely betrayed by one's spouse, but it is another to discover that she has. My wife's infidelity was particularly troubling to me because she left me for a man who was, in fact, quite disagreeable. While I do not wish to make sweeping generalizations, it seems plausible that there is some truth to the assertion that a significant number of women are attracted to men who embody the characteristics that my wife described. I am uncertain as to whether it was his physical appearance, his ostentatious lifestyle, his verbosity, or perhaps some other quality that initially attracted her, but she did express interest in him, and the relationship commenced. I was profoundly hurt when I later learned of these events. I was disconcerted to discover that my wife had initiated the affair and that she had been engaged in it for approximately 6 months without my awareness. She had engaged in sexual intercourse with him in his vehicle, in a restaurant, in hotels, and in our own home, when no other individuals were present. I was profoundly hurt by this betrayal, but I considered my options and maintained my composure. In the following weeks, I experienced a range of intense emotions, including tears, sadness, and pleading. As a result of these feelings, I spent an entire weekend creating a matrix and diagram of my various options and the potential consequences of each. I then proceeded to assign numerical values to each option in order to determine the most optimal course of action. This process was, in retrospect, rather unusual and lacked any resemblance to a typical human reaction. It is curious to note that the act of thinking rationally and formulating a plan has led to the realization of a course of action that is perceived to be the optimal one for the future. My father, in particular, was incensed and began uttering vitriolic statements about the individual in question. My wife's family, too, expressed disquietude regarding the situation, though they did not exhibit the same degree of vehemence and resentment as my own relatives. My parents-in-law were benevolent towards me, yet they employed every means at their disposal to facilitate a resolution. To provide support and assistance to their daughter, as I understood it, was their prerogative. However, I did have to intervene and request that my father cease hurling vitriolic insults at my wife. She was still the mother of his grandchildren, and he was duty-bound to extend her respect as a grandfather. My father actually concurred and expressed gratitude for my approach to this situation. I informed him that I did not perceive any personal benefit in seeking retribution against my soon-to-be former spouse. My wife was the mother of my children, and I recognized the importance of maintaining a communicative relationship with her for the sake of our children. I want to be clear that I had no intention of becoming a scoundrel. I carefully considered my options. In hindsight, I believe I made the right choice. As I previously mentioned, the situation was challenging, but she ultimately made the decision to move on. She subsequently relocated to the residence of a male acquaintance, demonstrating a desire to maintain involvement in her children's lives. Additionally, I empathized with the wife of the aforementioned male acquaintance, who exhibited emotional distress in the aftermath of the incident. She subsequently sought employment elsewhere and initiated divorce proceedings. I occasionally encountered her at a local grocery store and extended my best wishes. She was originally from Pennsylvania. Subsequently, she returned to her place of origin. As far as I am aware, she subsequently married a suitable partner and has since enjoyed a stable family life. I wish her well. There is no doubt that her separation from this individual was beneficial for her. I only lost my temper on one occasion, which was due to the fact that she was in possession of a mobile phone that I found to be unnecessary. My wife never witnessed me becoming visibly distressed. I remained calm and I was not present during the incident. My wife had a flip phone at the time, which were relatively new and expensive. I paid for the phone, and at the time, I was unaware of its functions. My wife informed me that the phone was for safety and protection, but she desired it so that she could communicate with her new romantic partner. I heard the phone ring once when she initially expressed her intention to leave. I then discarded the phone. Upon her departure from the room, the device suffered a significant malfunction and was subsequently discarded. I denied any knowledge of his whereabouts, but my wife conducted an exhaustive 2-day search and ultimately concluded that the device was lost. The divorce proceedings were relatively amicable, and a financial settlement was reached. I agreed to provide child support for a limited duration, which I believe was a fair arrangement. The dissolution of the marriage was concluded within a year or, at the most, 15 months. It was a relatively inexpensive method of extricating myself from the situation. Indeed, I would probably agree to any financial demand she made just to bring this situation to a conclusion. I remained the children's primary caregiver, while she had 50-50 visitation rights. I informed her that she could always come in and see the children, and she did so on numerous occasions. It appeared to be going relatively smoothly. Additionally, it seemed that she enjoyed seeing herself when she came to visit the children. However, this may have been an unfounded hope. My wife did not earn a considerable income, but she made a modest monthly contribution to support the children. She made a commendable effort and never missed a payment related to the children. In retrospect, it is clear that my wife, following the miscarriage and its aftermath, my wife was experiencing a personal crisis. I am not a particularly admirable individual, yet it is inconceivable that my wife, in her right mind, would have done what she did. However, I was powerless and unable to take action. The day we signed the divorce papers was surreal. Everything appeared to be in order, yet it was still distressing. We convened at her lawyer's office, which was a dispiriting experience for me. I was disconcerted by her apparent happiness and the presence of her romantic partner. She appeared excited, which was a surprising development. We had been together for many years and had started a family, so this was the only instance during the divorce process when I felt she did not respect me. I chose to overlook the incident because it was evident that the marriage was over and that we needed to move on. When I signed the divorce papers, I observed a hint of regret in her eyes. I believe she was taken aback because I had considered what I would say and had already formulated my response. I must acknowledge that I am proud of what I said and of how well it was received. I am not an actor, but on that day, I was able to perform to a certain extent. I possessed a certain dramatic talent. I wrote it down and practiced it until I was able to recall it with ease. This is what I said: I am sad about this. I believe that we had a good life and were a good team. First, I must apologize to you if you believe that I have let you down. I was unable to provide you with the happiness that you desired. I must have failed you greatly if you believe that someone else would be able to provide you with a better chance. I endeavored to achieve the greatest degree of happiness that I was capable of, yet it became evident that my efforts were insufficient. The miscarriage had a profound impact on our relationship, and it is plausible that it contributed to the deterioration of our bond to a greater extent than we initially perceived. When faced with adversity, individuals often exhibit contrasting behaviors, either becoming closer and stronger or experiencing separation and loss. It is unfortunate and ironic that what should have been a joyful experience for us ultimately led to our demise. In the past, I have striven to ensure your happiness, with a view to enabling us to collaborate in providing our children with the optimal and most stable of lives. At that moment, the room froze. When I said this, her face went white, and I believe I saw regret in her eyes afterwards. I stood up, shook her hand, wished her well, and said goodbye. Her lawyer subsequently informed me that he would send me a copy of the relevant documents. Everything proceeded without incident at first. She resided with this individual for a period of several months, during which time the relationship began to exhibit signs of deterioration. It subsequently became evident that he engaged in excessive alcohol consumption, exhibited a lack of initiative, relied on his family for financial support, and displayed a lack of masculine attributes. Additionally, he demonstrated a proclivity for younger women, with whom he had already initiated contact. One such individual was a young woman employed at a restaurant owned by his father. It is noteworthy that I continued to order food from their establishment despite the circumstances. The proprietor consistently greeted me when I arrived to place an order and always did so with a welcoming demeanor. The quality of the food was consistently excellent, and I particularly enjoyed their pizza and lasagna. I found it challenging to forego this establishment's takeout meals, and I was reluctant to alter my routine. The proprietor greeted me cordially each time I passed his residence. Additionally, I observed him at various local establishments, including the grocery store, school, and sporting events, where he was present to watch his grandchildren. I did not linger at the restaurant. Instead, I placed an order and proceeded to the pickup window. It would have been unseemly for me to remain at the establishment. The proprietor's son was married to the owner's wife. Additionally, the owner's son had abandoned his wife. The owner was unhappy about this. He was a family man. He once told me that he did not understand where he had gone wrong with his son. Unsurprisingly, things started to go downhill with this new, exciting power couple. My ex-wife called them that way once. I admit it really irritated me. The power couple was now constantly fighting. Things were not going well for my ex-wife. I think my wife began to recognize that I might not be as unsuitable a choice as she had previously believed. She perceived me as a reliable partner who prioritized her and the children. I was a devoted husband, and she may have made an unfortunate decision. She frequently contacted me to express her discontent with her circumstances. I informed her that I was not the appropriate individual with whom to discuss this matter. In response, she asserted that I was her closest friend and that she could always confide in me. I acknowledged that this was true, but I also stated that circumstances had changed, and I was no longer comfortable participating in that particular conversation. She was, therefore, required to resolve the issue independently. With her new partner, I was disinclined to become involved in her relationship and was uninterested in her relationship with her new boyfriend. She concurred, but I sensed a hint of pain and regret in her voice when she terminated the call after I informed her that one night she invited the children to her apartment. That evening, I received an excited call from her. She informed me that she had invited her boyfriend and the children to her apartment for a sleepover and to watch movies. However, the boyfriend had consumed too much alcohol and became angry when the children refused to watch one of his shows. The specific details of the show are unclear, but it is evident that the children were uninterested, leading to a physical altercation. The man became enraged and struck my youngest daughter, believing she was displaying arrogance. The impact was significant, leaving a visible mark on her cheek. I received the call and immediately proceeded to the scene. My initial inclination was to contact the authorities, which might have been the most appropriate course of action. However, I went there to retrieve my children. It was not. Despite the circumstances, I still find the incident somewhat amusing. The individual in question was physically attractive and well-built, though not particularly large in stature. It is worth noting that I am a physically imposing man with extensive military experience and a keen understanding of self-defense. I swiftly secured his neck with my hand. I then proceeded to grasp his right hand with my left hand and began striking him with my own hand while simultaneously informing him that he was assaulting himself. I recalled a similar incident that occurred during my tenure in the military, which prompted me to adopt this approach. I deemed this course of action to be an appropriate response. This was an effective method of resolving the situation. It was clear that the individual in question was extremely humiliated. I then collected my children and departed. I informed him that if I received any further communication regarding this matter, would contact the authorities. This would result in significant difficulties for him. It was my last resort, as it would also cause complications for my former spouse. My wife was unable to cope with the additional stress. I must admit that I derived a certain satisfaction from reprimanding my former spouse. My wife made a cutting remark, stating, "This is why you left me." She did not elaborate further but lowered her head, indicating that she was ashamed of what had transpired. It is unclear whether this indicated regret over the divorce or a realization of the consequences of her actions, accompanied by feelings of remorse. Later that night, she knocked on my door, visibly distressed. I allowed her entry, and she informed me that she had ended her relationship with her boyfriend and wished to reconcile. I reflected for several minutes and informed her of my feelings. Despite our shared history, I could not serve as a secondary option, given the dissolution of her relationship and the circumstances that had transpired. I deemed it unwise for her to return, as it would evoke distressing memories. Nevertheless, I was committed to ensuring her safety and well-being. I accompanied her to her parents' residence, where she contacted them. My father-in-law greeted me at the door and expressed gratitude. He stated that I have consistently demonstrated moral rectitude and fidelity in my marital relationship. He acknowledged my prioritization of the children's well-being and concern for their safety. In response, I reassured him of my enduring affection for his daughter. Despite the challenges we faced, I am proud of my actions that night and of my decision to safeguard my children and, ultimately, my ex-wife. My wife resided with her parents for approximately a year until she was financially stable enough to move out. She secured a suitable position with my assistance and contacts, and subsequently relocated to her own residence. She had consistently demonstrated exemplary parenting skills, and her former vitality and enthusiasm had returned. While the relationship was not without its challenges, there was a sense of normalcy. However, she has been involved in numerous relationships that did not progress, and it appears that she has been taken advantage of on multiple occasions. For reasons that remain unclear, she had a tendency to pursue individuals who were physically attractive but morally questionable. I have always regarded such individuals with disdain, as I did my ex-wife. My wife served as a tangible example of why these men often appear to be losers. She frequently found herself in situations where she was lending money to them, entangled in love triangles, and generally dealing with a plethora of challenging circumstances. On numerous occasions, she asserted that I was the most fulfilling relationship she had ever had and that no other individual could compare. While this assertion may have been largely hyperbolic, I nonetheless found it encouraging to hear. One day, I inadvertently caused distress to my wife when I asserted that I was her most significant romantic partner. She made the unfortunate mistake of allowing our relationship to deteriorate as a result. She was attempting to be sincere. She was visibly upset when I suggested that perhaps if I had been more disagreeable and treated her poorly at times, she would not have eloped with another man because she appeared to derive pleasure from supporting and comforting others. She did not speak to me for almost a month after that, but I must admit that I derived enjoyment from it and appreciated the impact it had on her. A month later, we began communicating again and she expressed amusement and informed me that, unfortunately, despite the circumstances, he maintained a polite and respectful relationship with her. He believed that he could be with her again if he wanted, but he was afraid of getting hurt again. He had dated some women and did not claim to have lived like a monk after his divorce. Everything was fine for him at the time, but he was busy with work and children. The majority of single women of a similar age to myself had also undergone divorce and were experiencing their own family-related difficulties. During this period, I had several encounters that I believe justified my approach. I was reluctant to invite women home unless I was seriously interested in the person I was dating. Some women were very attractive and appealing, but I was not willing to take the relationship to the next level. Some of them wanted more from me, but I was not prepared to oblige. My focus was on work, childcare, and I was not interested in pursuing another marriage or long-term relationship. I was reluctant to enter into a long-term relationship. I was not interested in investing the time and emotional energy required for such a commitment. Even when presented with opportunities, I did not allow myself to become too invested. Some of my former partners accused me of leading them on and taking advantage of their feelings. However, I was always honest with them. I would also be a liar if I said that my past feelings for my ex-wife did not influence my decisions. My wife exerted no influence on my decision. I was disinclined to pursue a more serious relationship, having already experienced the pain of a failed relationship. Given the stark differences between then and now, I found myself nostalgic for the simplicity of a dating site, where I could post a photo and search for potential matches. While the circumstances were not inherently better, the nature of the relationship had changed. The primary reason for my decision was the presence of numerous negative memories. I concluded that the best course of action was to remain single. However, I derived a certain pleasure from my ex-wife's company. My wife frequently inquired about my potential romantic involvement with other women. Given my reasons for avoiding such interactions, the children were unable to provide any information. This led to frequent confrontations with my wife, who sought to gain insight into my relationship status. I would often deflect these inquiries by changing the subject, a tactic that often resulted in further contention. Despite these challenges, I maintained a positive outlook on my romantic life, expressing a sense of contentment and no significant issues or complaints. While this may have been perceived as a form of petulance, it was a coping mechanism that provided me with a sense of stability amidst the turbulence of our relationship. The discovery of the affair provided a brief period of pleasure, which lasted for several days. It is noteworthy that one of the most significant events in our lives occurred when I was called back to active duty to participate in the Iraq War. I was not pleased with the summons, as I believed that I had already fulfilled my obligation to active service and spent another 18 years in the reserves. I had assumed that my time in service was over, but I had made a commitment and was obliged to fulfill my responsibilities. My wife was understandably anxious about my situation. She had also been called to active duty during the First Gulf War and was therefore aware of the challenges I would be facing. She attempted to discuss our past relationship and the possibility of reconciliation before I departed, but I was not in a position to address such matters at that time. I informed her that I was grateful for her presence and that I was confident she would provide adequate care for our children with the support of both our families during my business trip. My wife likely wrote me approximately a dozen letters and sent me several packages during this period. I was unable to engage in emotional distress and needed to maintain a clear mind. Additionally, a group photo of my unit was featured in a news magazine, and I was included in the photo. The circumstances were challenging, and the image did not portray me as an epitome of cleanliness and health. This photo seemed to have a profound impact on her, and she expressed concern for my well-being. It was a challenging period for me as well. However, I lacked the time and motivation to address issues that might have diverted my attention. In a sense, I was driven by a desire for vengeance. I did not open or read a single letter from her. Instead, I discarded them and kept my thoughts about her at a distance. I maintained regular communication with my children, and they, in turn, wrote to me frequently. Some of their letters discussed my wife's suffering was a direct result of my lack of response. However, I was determined not to allow this drama into my life. As a consequence, I never answered her when I returned home. 10 months later, I saw my ex-wife. At a family event to celebrate my return, I was displeased that my parents invited her. However, I did not consider the implications of this decision. The fact is that my affection for her never diminished, and seeing her always caused me distress. Nevertheless, I was unable to overcome my feelings and ultimately became fearful. She informed me that she was deeply hurt and surprised that I did not respond to her messages or at least send her a note expressing gratitude for the cookies and cake she sent me. I frankly stated that I had not read any of her messages and had discarded the packages without opening them. I informed her that we had terminated our relationship years ago. I did not request that she communicate with me. The situation remained emotionally distressing for me, and I was reluctant to engage in any further conflict with her. She was aware that we needed to collaborate for the benefit of our children. I would have been willing to assist her with childcare and ensure her safety, but I had misrepresented my intentions by stating that I was not interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with her. I had observed her demeanor to be regretful when I signed the divorce papers, but I believe that my subsequent actions had a significant impact on her. She later informed me that this incident had a profound effect on her. The husband was sent to a very challenging emotional state, and he was disinclined to engage with her messages. She informed me that it was a significant source of distress, causing her considerable pain and prompting her to reflect on the long-term implications of her actions. In hindsight, I am ashamed of my conduct in this situation. I responded to all correspondence, but I was unable to respond to my former spouse. My actions were not an optimal reflection of my character, and I am not proud of how I treated my wife. The truth that I did not share with her is that I did not respond because I still held feelings for her and was afraid because of what had transpired earlier. However, we had a very good relationship. It is important to recognize that relationships are imperfect and that individuals are imperfect. We worked together to raise our children and were a highly effective team when it came to our children. Given the frequency with which she visited the house to see the children, I was on the verge of suggesting that she move back in. Had I proposed this, I believe she would have readily agreed. As my daughters matured, she became an indispensable presence in their lives. I endeavored to assist, but I believe that a mother is often better equipped to handle certain situations than a father. She provided invaluable guidance to my daughters, supporting them through the challenges of romantic relationships and beyond. My wife demonstrated remarkable proficiency in navigating these challenges. I developed a profound respect for her as I observed her adeptness in guiding children toward sound decision-making. One of my daughters had a romantic involvement with an individual whom I regarded as an archetypal malefactor. The circumstances surrounding this incident remain unclear, but my wife initiated a conversation with her. She appeared to be imparting insights drawn from her own experiences, elucidating the implications of her actions. Fortunately, the problematic individual was swiftly dispatched, and I experienced a profound sense of relief. The years passed swiftly, and my children pursued higher education, established careers, and entered into matrimony, while I continued to interact with my former spouse. My wife attended numerous family events, during which she consistently inquired about my romantic involvement. She persistently sought to ascertain the possibility of our reconciliation. I consistently declined, citing the irrevocable nature of certain circumstances in life. She appeared despondent and conveyed her understanding. She asserted that her decision to leave me was the most unfortunate and misguided of her life. She informed me that not a day goes by without her contemplating the possibilities of what might have been. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that I experienced similar sentiments, yet I was too intimidated to express them or to give her the opportunity to witness the potential outcome. She also disclosed that she had discovered she found it especially challenging at events such as weddings, birthday celebrations, and other family gatherings. She informed me that the most difficult days from her perspective were the funerals of her mother and father. While she was pleased to see me in attendance, she was deeply saddened because I was not there as her husband. She sought the support of her partner during this challenging period. She recognized that I was a resilient individual and a devoted husband, yet she experienced feelings of solitude and remorse. These sentiments manifested during significant life events, including our children's weddings and the arrival of our grandchildren. She perceived these occasions as joyous occasions, yet she also harbored regret. She inquired as to whether I had ever experienced a similar sentiment. I have consistently maintained that the dissolution of my marriage was a profoundly disheartening ordeal. However, I have chosen to move forward, refusing to dwell on the past. I informed her that I perceived her regret to be somewhat incongruous, particularly given her conviction that true fulfillment could only be attained with her new romantic partner. I had previously avoided discussing this topic, as I found it distressing. Recently, however, I encountered a situation at work that prompted me to reconsider. I was surprised to learn that my situation was not as uncommon as I had assumed. In fact, a colleague of mine had a similar experience, but in his case, it was his wife who had initiated the affair. This was due to the death of his son in a car accident. The man in question was unable to cope with the tragedy and, as a result, experienced a kind of emotional death along with his son. He was unable to move on from this and began to blame his wife. It was as though he had transferred his grief onto her. He then became drawn into the idea that something was missing in his life and began an affair with another woman. I was similarly perplexed. He departed from his marriage of over 2 decades to pursue a relationship with a woman he encountered on a business excursion. Additionally, he made unfortunate decisions, including divorcing, remarrying, and divorcing again within a span of less than 5 years. I had lunch with him and was taken aback when he revealed that he was currently dating his former spouse. My ex-wife subsequently remarried, and their relationship flourished. I am convinced that some individuals are unable to cope with traumatic experiences and attempt to avoid confronting them. I believe this was the case with my ex-wife. I must acknowledge that this situation has prompted me to reflect deeply on my life and my relationship with my ex-wife. Now, at the age of almost 60, I am contemplating retirement and relocation to a warmer climate, at least during the colder months. My children support me and value their mother's relationship with their father. The last time I spoke to my ex-wife, prior to relocating, my wife attended the birthday celebration of one of our grandchildren. She requested a private conversation with me, which we conducted outside. She then became visibly distressed and upset. She had always believed there was a possibility of reconciliation. My decision to move would signify the definitive end of our marriage, potentially leading to her feelings of regret for failing to fulfill her role as a wife. I informed her that a considerable amount of time had elapsed and that she should not hold on to such sentiments. I expressed my admiration and respect for her. I conveyed that she had endured significant challenges but had managed to rebuild her life. She was an exemplary mother and had a distinguished career here and was a friend to many people, including me. It was unfair to dwell on an issue that occurred so many years ago. I had already moved on from this and suggested she do the same. She continued to cry and asked if I truly believed it was possible to let go of such a significant event. It was a significant misstep on her part. She expressed profound regret for her infidelity and its ramifications on our family. She disclosed that she remains uncertain about her actions and contemplates them frequently. She acknowledged that she had lost sight of the woman she had been for so many years. She then became composed, took my hands, and gazed at me. She gazed into my eyes and inquired if she might visit me. I replied that I was unsure but would consider the possibility. I must acknowledge that each time I looked into her green eyes, I felt a profound sense of affection. Today was no exception. She appeared especially radiant, and the passage of time had been kind to her. I must admit that, regardless of past circumstances, I have never felt a greater depth of affection for her than at that moment. It may not be a conventional explanation, but the heart's feelings are complex and multifaceted. She kissed me for the first time in nearly 3 decades, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the significance of that moment. At that moment, I desired her return to my life more than anything else. I managed to maintain my composure. I informed her that I needed time to consider the situation and my options. The conversation and situation played repeatedly in my mind. At this point in my life, I considered the possibility of being happy in a relationship with her. I would not marry again, but what did I have to lose at this stage? She had once made me happy, and my love for her had not diminished. Perhaps we could move forward. I now live in the Carolinas, and my wife came to visit me after I informed her of my desire for her to come see me. I recognize that this may seem unconventional, but I still experience a profound sense of affection for her. She chose to stay with me, and we spent a considerable amount of time together. I am pleased to report that, despite the passage of time and the inevitable changes that accompany it, we have managed to maintain a positive and productive relationship. During her visit, which lasted from one weekend to a month, she began to shed tears over a matter that had occurred several years prior. She informed me that the previous few weeks had brought her considerable joy and that she was remorseful for her actions. She stated that she frequently contemplates hypothetical scenarios and questions whether she has been pursuing an unattainable idealistic relationship. I advised her that the matter was resolved and that it might be time to consider a future together. I reassured her that my feelings for her had not diminished and suggested that she might be interested in a permanent relationship. Her expression indicated surprise at my suggestion. She grasped my hands and inquired as to the sincerity of my declaration. I informed her that it was a spontaneous decision, yet one that I had contemplated for an extended period. I reiterated that I was serious and that, should she choose to remain, I would never allow her to depart from my life. I also informed her that I was undecided about the prospect of remarriage, but that it was a matter of little consequence at this juncture in our lives. She concurred, and we have since enjoyed a cordial relationship. The children were taken aback when we informed them of the news, but they were also quite. My youngest daughter expressed happiness for us. She stated that she was not surprised because she was aware that my love for her mother had not diminished. She sensed that our relationship was not over. Currently, everything is going well, and we have no complaints. I am not suggesting that our relationship is perfect. However, we get along well as a couple and are very happy. The primary challenge we face is that my wife continues to lament the choices she made over 30 years ago. I informed her that the past is in the past for now. It is not my intention to revisit the past. We had a happy family life, despite experiencing some difficulties. Currently, everything is going well. However, she still feels the need to demonstrate her loyalty to me. I have informed her that this is no longer a concern as she is aware of my affection for her. It is important for her to move on from the past and focus on the future. She also wishes to demonstrate her complete transparency. I have made it clear that I am not interested in monitoring her phone or social media activities. I trust her and am not concerned about past actions that occurred 30 years ago. She is aware of this, yet for reasons that remain unclear, she still feels the need to prove herself. This is not a significant issue, but it does resurface intermittently. However, this situation also improves over time, and she becomes more confident in our relationship. We ultimately decided to get married in the chapel with our family present. At this stage, we did not see the point in legal marriage, but it was important to both of us that our renewed relationship be blessed by God. This may be an outdated sentiment. One aspect that I consider significant is that I reflected extensively on our vows from years ago. The phrase, "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder," resonated with me. It's possible that we were destined to be together, and this ceremony was merely a reaffirmation of that destiny. However, it's noteworthy that the incident during our movie night, which involved my wife being punched, is the only event that causes her distress when I bring it up. While we can discuss other topics rationally, this incident evokes a strong emotional response from her, even leading to hysterics. Despite the passage of decades, she has a difficult time accepting that this individual struck her daughter and was unable to prevent it. I referenced the incident once when she initially visited me. It was a lengthy period of emotional distress, including crying, trembling, and expressing remorse. Given my preference to avoid such an experience again, I did not broach the topic further and do not intend to do so in the future. Some may view my decision to revisit this matter after such a considerable time as unconventional, but at this stage in our lives, the incident that occurred many years ago is now in the past. When I see my wife, I acknowledge that I have always considered her my wife. I feel only love and affection towards her. I believe that our relationship will improve and that we will have many more years together as we enter old age. She did make some poor decisions many years ago, but that is in the past. We have both faced the consequences, but now I am looking forward to life and moving forward. This may sound sentimental, but one thing is important to me. I always thought we were writing a book together, but I was sad that we might never get the chance to finish it. I am glad we now have another chance to finish writing this book and include the final chapters. Will my wife cheat again? I do not think she will do so at this point in our lives, but age and experience have shown me that all people are a mixture of good and bad. Each individual possesses both positive and negative qualities, and a single action or decision does not define a person. I also have regrets. My regret is that I always loved my wife and allowed negative emotions to influence my decisions. Perhaps I should have accepted that she was human and made a poor choice. Perhaps I should have given this a chance sooner, and things could have been better. I consider what-if scenarios as well, but I am grateful for this second chance.